Did you know that today is National Hippie Day? Hence the tie-dye? That's pretty far out. Plus, it's the anniversary of the Woodstock Music Festival held back in 1969.
Well, that's just groovy. I just want to get on. So dig this. We've got someone here to share the story of the first ever hippie on the Delmarva Peninsula. Here is the man himself, Jim Duffy, author of Secrets of the Eastern Shore. How are you, sir?
Peace.
Oh, this is a fun segment.
So, all right, based on all the not so subtle puns, I'm guessing we're starting in the 60s.
We are. We are starting in the 1660s.
Oh, the
Oh.
1660s.
The 1660s.
Okay.
That is when a guy named Peter Corneliszun Placoy arrived in Sussex County, Delaware. The
Okay.
first hippie in America. He came from the Netherlands, a town called Zeeland. Now, mid-1600s, if you put it in a snow bubble and shook it up and looked at it kind of sideways,
Right.
you could see the 1960s. There was a stick it to the man, power to the people thing going on in Europe. The English Civil War, they were trying to depose the king, and they hated the king, and they wanted Parliament to be in charge and have more representation to it.
Right.
And there was also a thing going on that was kind of like transcendental meditation and all that kind of groovy stuff that was happening in the 60s. Because the Reformation had reached this point where there were all these weird little sects starting up. And it was, we don't want anybody in charge, we don't want any bishops, no priests, it's just me and God, we're all alone here and we're gonna do it. And a lot of these little sects had like these ecstatic visions. As far as I know,
Yep.
they didn't have any psychedelic drugs, but they did have these ecstatic visions and they would write them out and do all of this kind of stuff. Yeah. So it was very hippie-esque.
Okay.
Peter Corneliszun Placoy.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't even know how he says
He
that.
used to
but-
hang out at a bar called the Sweet Rest in the Netherlands. Okay. And all these people who were part of one of these sects, probably the wildest, hippiest kind of the sects, they were called the collegians. They would all get together and they would drink and they would dream about making a better world. And that world would be a society of mutual love. He ended up becoming a big deal. He wrote a book. The title of the book has like 2,000 words on it, but it begins a way propounded to make the poor of this and other societies happier.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Okay. And the idea was basically completely straight on to build a commune. It was going to be one family government. And everyone was going to live there. No one was going to have property or anything like that. It was just going to be mutual sharing, complete tolerance. He tried to convince some powerful people in Europe that they should get behind him on this. They all rejected him out of hand. And so he figured what he needed was a pilot project. And the perfect place to do the first ever commune was in Sussex County, Delaware. In July of 1663, he landed in Lewis with 40 followers and set up a little community where he got about the business of all of this mutual love and family government. Now, it's easy to kind of laugh at the naivety of this, but I should mention two things. First, women. He wanted women to be trained in jobs that would make them productive members of societies and not be dependent on men to make a living.
Forward thinking.
All right?
I like it.
The second thing was no slavery. Out.
Now,
We don't do that. So he was very much on the early end of the abolition movement.
So he had great
Now,
ideas.
he was also kind of okay with polygamy, but that's another
That's a
story.
whole
So
nother
that's another story.
We'll bypass
You
that.
had
That's
me
another
for a while
story.
there.
That's another story.
Back to what we're talking about.
So his Society of Mutual Love lasts for 13 months. He spends that 13 months, he's trying to recruit more people from Europe to join him and be a part of all this. But Sussex County at that time was under Dutch control when he started.
Okay.
And then in 1664, after 13 short months, a fleet of British warships turns up on the coast off of Lewis, and the Dutch surrender, and that's how Delaware became an English colony. By this time, the king was back in power.
Right.
The king didn't like all these hippie sects. No good. He didn't like that at all.
Love
so
and
the
peace.
British Army, the report from some general or something was that I destroyed the colony of Placoy to the last nail. He only lived for another year, and his 40 followers seem to have just kind of floated into the regular population in Delaware. So perhaps some descendants of the first hippie are watching us
still-
today.
Oh,
Happy National Hippie
Happy
Day.
National Hippie,
Hippie Day. Clock Boy. That's a name.
Jim Duffy, as always, thank you again. That's some fascinating stuff.